guys, welcome back. You're watching Hard Luck Garage. My name is John, and behind me is my 1941 Chevy Coupe. I've been chipping away at this thing a couple hours at a time here and there. I really want to get this thing on the road before the snow flies, ideally before the leaves fall off. But either way, I'd like to drive it this year. This time, we're gonna focus on something that is a little bit out of order from the way that one might think things should go. So today, since it's already up on jack stands, the wheels are off, we just got done doing the brakes. A sane person would probably be like trying to make sure it would run okay and blah 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 blah. But my somewhat efficient brain and somewhat weird working brain says, let's lower this car before we let it down. Sometimes with these types of projects, you need a little bit of motivation, a little bit of a push when you're just in the weeds fiddling around with little stuff to make yourself go, oh yeah, that's what I'm after. So I'm gonna focus first on lowering the rear. I got some blocks and new U-bolts from one of the companies that you can buy parts for your Chevrolet from the 1940s. And then when it comes to the front, I'm gonna drop the front A-arms down and cut a coil off the front springs and see where it sits. I'm not gonna hate it if the tail's down a little bit or if the nose is a little high. It kind of hits that period look that I'm going after. I got a set of like 49 Oldsmobile sombrero type caps for it, full wheel covers, and that should hide most of the red wheels. I'm not gonna worry about painting the wheels. I just want this thing to have a little bit of the look that I'm going for, like a late 40s, maybe a really early 50s mild custom. I'm gonna quit talking and get to work on lowering the rear end of this thing. That is caked in the dirt. Say, I wonder how old that dirt is, but it's kind of all the same age. Yes, sir. All right, I'm gonna have a problem here in the near future if I don't lower this axle down, because as soon as I take off the next U-bolt, she's gonna want to pop right up. So we'll figure something out. Good thing leaf springs can articulate. I'm doing one side at a time. Just gonna clean up this spring as best as I can, real quick. Let's be honest, this car is gonna get driven on a dirt road, so we're not gonna get. I guess we might as well have a clean starting point, but you know, at least getting the dirt out of here is kind of nice. Making you feel better again, like I said. All right, I got my lift block here. It's a solid chunk, straight 3 inches. No like, no pinion angle built in or anything. Come with a bag of hardware and brand new U-bolts, longer. So basically, just replace what we took out, add in the block. Uh-oh, we got issues. Might have to open up this hole a little bit in the bottom of this aluminum block to fit over the spring pin. Let's see what we can do. So using one of my favorite measuring tools, an open end wrench, I found out that the pin in the top of the spring is a 1/2 inch. And this right here, to be steady about it, is like just a hair under. So I think I just have to open that up a little bit, see what I can find for a drill bit. Maybe there's just a burr. I got these Christmas tree bits here we'll try, but I think I'm just gonna go ahead and try a few things because I don't got all night. I gotta figure this out, so it should be pretty simple. Kind of had to finagle the axle back and forth for it to find its home in the pins, but we found it. Feels like the rear shocks work. This front U-bolt plate bracket ends up hooking to the rear shock links. They look like sway bar links. And I can actually feel the shocks shocking, which is kind of shocking, but kind of a bonus. I'm gonna throw these washers and nuts on. Looks like we got one lock washer for every nut. Make sure you don't forget the plate, otherwise this doesn't work at all. Probably have to be cutting these bolts off at the end of the day. We'll be throwing some sparks. But hardware feels pretty good. Run it up by hand, relatively close to tight. I'll make sure the U-bolts kind of hang where they're going to be loaded and make sure they're all seated right, so they don't want to shift around and move like the first time this thing gets weight put on it. I got these lift blocks from the 1940s Chevy parts place, because most of your lift blocks you'll find are 2 inches wide, and these springs in these early Chevys were 1 3/4 wide, and it just don't work if they're too wide. These U-bolts don't fit around the lift block, so keep that in mind if you're looking around for parts and you find those cheap ones on eBay. I don't know that these are a whole lot different, but I just didn't want to fool around a whole lot, and these ones were available, so pretty cheap way to lower your car regardless of how many dollars and cents they go for on eBay and what the difference is here. I'm going to run these in and I'll start tightening these down and kind of move the rear end around. I don't want to go totally tight yet, I don't think, because I want to have the other side kind of settling and like resting on the leaf spring before I tighten everything down, so it can have the best chance of being where it wants to be. Kind of got to think about how everything's going to be under load and how it's going to want to pull and push when the car's on the ground. But I want to get this kind of snuggish. I'm not going to put any real force on it yet. The bolts are too long, I can't get a socket on there. The rear end hanging in there on its own. The blocks are in, the U-bolts are in, the nuts are on. It's all kind of halfway snug so that things can still shift around. And I'm basically just going to let the weight off back onto the leaf springs and shift the U-bolts so that they are like parallel to the ends of the lift blocks. That way, you know, they're pulling the straightest that they can when we tighten them down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, get this thing lifted back up so I can tighten these down a little bit better. I got these nuts as far on as I can by hand. but I think I'm gonna have to throw some sparks like I'm shooting a car TV show intro. So I'm gonna cut those bolts off so I can actually tighten them on reasonably. I've managed to wear myself out, but the blocks are installed. I got everything tight, but not super tight. I definitely want to stretch those U-bolts a little bit more, but you can kind of feel as you're tightening them when they bottom out on the blocks and then you start to stretch the U-bolt. You want it to stretch, and it'll stretch as you drive and as things like seat in. So you want to go back and periodically check these until they don't really want to tighten up anymore. So we'll probably run it up and down the driveway and check them again. But for tonight, I gotta call it there. We'll get back on the front later. And hopefully we'll be able to set this thing down, see what it looks like out in the daylight. So don't go anywhere. Okay, back out here again tonight. I got a little bit more time to mess around. It's a little earlier of a start. I'm gonna try and tackle the front end and see if I can get those front springs cut down. I'm gonna drop the front lower control arms from the center because shop manual says so, and that honestly looks like the easier way to do it. So there's about 4 bolts on each side, and it shouldn't be too bad, but you know how these things go, so I guess let's find out. Jeepers creepers, I guess. All right. Yuck. So I've got bolt under all this crust right here, two nuts, 1, 2, 2 more over here, 3, 4, and I think I'm gonna have to pull the sway bar link out, and maybe if that doesn't come out, I'll just drop the bar. But I should be able to drop this, put a jack under here, unbolt this end of the control arm, and just swing the whole thing down, get the spring out, cut some off, and put it back together. Ow. Well, not the worst thing in the world. We'll see about getting it back together, I guess. But I'm gonna go get that other side taken apart. And I'll meet you back here when we're both staring at 2 springs on the floor. And we'll see what we're gonna do next. All right, just to show you guys exactly what I'm doing here. Got my floor jack up on this cross pivot piece of the lower control arm where it bolts to the cross member. And I've got all my nuts off. There were cotter pins in each nut, and instead of messing around with all that on my back, I just hammered the socket on and broke the cotter pins off. I'll pound the holes out on the bench, clean up the hardware. But I have one bolt hanging by a thread, and the jack is now pushing up the load of the car. It has the load of the spring off of it. So as soon as I let down the jack, everything kind of unloads and the spring will just fall out. So I'm gonna do that. Put the camera down in a minute. I'll let the jack down, and hopefully you guys don't get hit in the face. I gotta take the nut off. These were a 5/8 nut and bolt. So I'm slowly letting the weight off of this thing. What I had to do on the other side was take the nuts off, unload it, and then kind of pry it around to get it to free up. And then it will let loose all of a sudden, which may prove difficult for reassembly, but you can definitely tell that the spring is under some tension yet. I just lowered the jack a little bit at a time so that the control arm has somewhere to go, bottom out against there. And if you play this right, it won't bind up. But the other side kind of did this, where the holes are such a tight fit that they kind of bound up in this crossbar, and I ended up having to kind of pry it around a little bit. But the hammer kind of helps shock it too. I'm gonna grab that hammer, see if I can get this worked out of here. Sometimes you gotta hammer the opposite direction that you might think to get something to happen. This really kind of stuck. So I'm gonna jack up again, see if I can take the tension off a little bit. Well, I know what the problem is. I didn't take my sway bar link off, so I better do that, I guess. See if we can get this out. See if we can turn it the right way. Ah, there we go. It's kind of amazing how well this old stuff comes apart if it wasn't all rusted out. It's like these bolts, probably 84 years old or whatever it is, 83. And I'm taking it right off the threads, like maybe like it was a 10-year-old car today, a 5-year-old car. It's like stuff gets bad so quick now. You might as well plan on grabbing the torch and just cutting this out on a car maybe 5 years old around here. This car came out of Kentucky, so that may be playing in my favor right now. That's kind of one of the reasons I bought it, because I don't like to struggle with rust. When I'm working on something fun for myself with a limited time available, it's more fun to just be able to get it done quick. Oh yeah, this is just gonna fall apart. We'll just put that back together when we're done. Okay, see if we can drop that arm out. This is a giant pry bar. I think it might even be an early Ford tool. We won't tell Mr. Chevrolet what we're doing. It's just binding up. That's nice. You're dropping that way too far. want it to pop, but I don't want it to pop that far. There it goes. I'm gonna drop it down. It's gonna be really fun to reassemble, I can tell. Spring number 2. Now I need you guys to go ahead and get mad at me down in those comments for wanting to cut these springs. And when you get back, we're gonna cut these springs. I've cut springs on a few different vehicles. Just do it. I mean, people say no. Be careful. If you cut it too much, when the suspension droops, the spring could fall out. So you gotta know what you're looking at, kinda. You gotta cut them right. But if you do it right and sensibly, there's nothing wrong with it. It just is a little bit stiffer, which sometimes is an improvement. So let me show you guys what my plan is here. So whenever you're looking at a coil spring, you want to look at both ends. And this end here clearly has a flat spot on the top, and this has a flat seat on the top. So you want to make sure that you're not cutting this end. And if you have a spring that looks like that on both sides, you might be able to get away with cutting a certain end, but make sure it has a little like indent in your control arm or your spring seat for the end of the pigtail of the spring. So for this one, I don't know, one coil is gonna cut me up to here. I'm gonna lose probably a ½ inch, but with the way the geometry of the suspension works out, control arm is about, well, okay, let's think about it. The distance from the spring to the spindle is about half the distance from the control arm to the spindle. So you probably want to double your height of what you cut off here as like a rule of thumb. So everybody's saying cut 1.5 off. I think that's what I'm going to do now that I'm looking at these, because one's not going to get me very much, and another ½ a turn, it's probably going to get me another inch of height lost on the spring. So I'm looking at maybe, let's see, 3 inches of a drop, which would be perfect because we're dropping the rear about 3. So I think I'm going to grab the cutoff wheel, lop those bad boys off, coil and a half, hang them on the wall for some decoration, and see about putting them back in. And they'll always be easier to put back in. You might not know the difference because you never took the stock one out and put the stock one back in, but since it's shorter, it should be a little bit easier, closer to everything as you're trying to compress it and line everything up. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll see where we're at. Well, I got the springs out, I got a coil and a half cut off, got my hardware cleaned up, and that's gonna be it for me right now. I'm gonna come back out here probably tomorrow night and try to put this all back together. So far into the rear, we have about a couple hours, and that's with me filming, so you can almost cut that in half, as long as things go somewhat smoothly. For the front, I'm at like an hour and a half at this point, so for whatever that's worth, it takes about twice as long to film this stuff as it does to just work on it. So bear that in mind. But I'll see you guys in the blink of an eye here, but I'm gonna go to bed. Show you guys my little trick here. I'm just using the biggest, meatiest Phillips screwdriver I can find, or flathead, whatever fits through the holes, but it's helping guide this hole to match this one, and then I'll show you what I did on the other side to make it line up for more than one bolt. I'm gonna just keep jacking on this so you guys watch that thing, and hopefully it doesn't explode on me, but I'm kind of helping it by holding it back because the upright at the end wants to fall this way. So this just kind of helps guide it into its home. When it gets it close, if you leave a little bit of gap, see I can kind of move it around. Now obviously use caution because this stuff's all under pressure, but it shouldn't go anywhere with this handle in here. So then I just took my bolt, found its hole, and then kind of finagled this around until the bolt went through. Then you can get a nut on here, and you know that thing is not going to pop out. A little bit of safety. I'm going to put the rest of my bolts in. And then this one kind of doesn't line up, so grab tapered punch to an alignment punch. This is what these things are for, if you were ever wondering. So you take it, put it in the hole, and you can move it back and forth to make something line up. 2 holes. Now, if I could find the one. So, kind of push and pull, and then it basically lines up the edges of that hole. And gives you a little way to wiggle into place. So I'm going to try and blindly put these other bolts in back here using this alignment punch trick. And you just kind of wiggle it. You guys can't see it, but I'm just doing this in the hole. And it's letting the bolts drop right in. That one dropped right in. So throw these nuts on. May have to jack it up a little bit, but we're going to be in business here real soon. I see the same thing happened on this side that the other side, where the spring is not in its seat, and I was able to just pry it to get it to go to its home. I'll have to do that again. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up all those bolts. and nuts and cotter pins and boring stuff. Throw the sway links on and maybe adjust the brakes before we throw the wheels back on. We'll see if we can get this turd outside. Pick the grease out of all these castle slots and these nuts. Got them. I'm not going to be adjusting any brakes. I'm kind of running out of time here, but I got to get the wheels on and I just have to see what this thing looks like sitting on the ground. So let's get it done. Well, it's outside. Wasn't able to get it to start, but that's something to work on, I guess. I'm gonna tell you guys right now, this is called the Dusty Custom because she got dusty. I'm on a dirt road. It's gonna get dustier, but I'm really happy with the way this thing sits. Nose up a little bit, kind of like how I wanted. And yeah, this is what you can expect if you put 3-inch lowering blocks and cut a coil and a half off of your 41 to 48 Chevy. Hope you guys like this. If you did, subscribe, like, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Helps this thing get out to people who want to see it, so I appreciate it. So you guys missed it, but I was able to get this thing to start and run, so if you stuck around this far, here you go. Accelerator pump. That sounds pretty good. Thanks for watching.